The chandeliers at the Plaza Hotel burned like liquid gold, casting halos over the city's most powerful elite. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and a symphony played softly in the background. Tonight was supposed to celebrate innovation and charity. But instead, it would become the scandal Manhattan would whisper about for years. At the center of the ballroom stood Adrian Cole, the magnetic 36-year-old CEO of Cole Innovations, dressed in a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo. Every journalist in the room waited for him to announce his company's partnership with the Blackwell Foundation, a deal rumored to be worth hundreds of millions. But when he lifted the microphone, he didn't talk about business. He talked about love. "Before we begin," Adrian said with that rehearsed charm that melted boardrooms, "there's someone I want to thank, my inspiration." He reached for the hand of Chloe Summers, the stunning model beside him. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked, confused. Then, without warning, he leaned down and kissed her full on the lips. The room froze. Whispers exploded like wildfire. Everyone knew Chloe, not just as the glamorous model on magazine covers, but as the best friend of Adrian's wife, interior designer Emily Carter. It wasn't a kiss of gratitude, it was a kiss of possession. A kiss meant to humiliate someone who wasn't even there to defend herself. Reporters gasped. A few guests exchanged nervous glances. One woman murmured, "Isn't his wife pregnant?" Another whispered, "Emily?" She designed the venue tonight. And then, the ballroom doors burst open. The orchestra faltered mid-note. Heads turned. In the doorway stood Emily, her pale silk gown tracing the soft curve of her 6-month pregnancy. Her eyes, wide but unflinching, locked onto the stage. Every camera swung toward her like metal to a magnet. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, in a perfectly cut black tuxedo, stood Ethan Blackwell, billionaire investor, and Adrian's most powerful ally, or so everyone thought. He placed a protective hand on Emily's back, as if shielding her from the avalanche of whispers that erupted. Adrian's smug smile drained from his face. Chloe's hand slipped from his arm. Ethan met Adrian's stunned gaze and said quietly, voice like thunder beneath silk, "You should have read your contracts more carefully, Adrian. From this moment on, everything changes." The flashes blinded the room. The audience, once dazzled by power, now fed on scandal. And as Emily lifted her chin, the world saw not a betrayed wife, but a woman about to reclaim everything that was stolen from her. Because the kiss that shattered Manhattan was only the beginning. The ballroom of the Plaza had turned into a war zone disguised in diamonds. The orchestra had stopped playing, and all that remained was the sound of whispers, soft, poisonous, and hungry. Emily Carter stood frozen under the blinding chandeliers, every flash of a camera slicing into her like glass. She could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her belly, on the life inside her that kicked as if sensing her heart break. Adrian stared from the stage, his expression flickering between disbelief and fury. His voice, once smooth and confident, came out sharp and brittle. "Emily, what are you doing here?" The words weren't out of concern. They were out of panic. Out of fear. Emily took a breath that trembled, but didn't break. "I was invited," she said, her voice steady. "You remember the Children's Architecture Initiative? The project I built from scratch for Cole Innovations? The one you're presenting tonight as your own?" A wave of gasps rolled through the guests. A woman in a sequined gown whispered to her husband, "She's the designer? I thought it was his team." Ethan Blackwell stepped forward, his presence commanding, his calm a deliberate contrast to Adrian's unraveling composure. "Actually," he said coolly, "the project belongs to Mrs. Carter. Her design firm Carter Atelier has full rights. I'm merely a sponsor." Adrian's jaw clenched. "You're joking." But Ethan only smiled, that quiet, devastating smile of a man used to power. "Do I look like a man who jokes about billion-dollar deals?" The crowd began to shift. The reporters were whispering now, fingers flying across their phones. Even the photographer from the Wall Street Herald lowered his camera, watching the drama unfold like theater. Emily could feel her pulse in her throat. She hadn't come here for revenge. She'd come to present her work, to prove she still belonged in the city that once called her the visionary behind Cole Innovations. But fate had other plans. Fate and betrayal. She remembered that morning. The warmth of Adrian's goodbye kiss before he left for meetings. The way he said, "You should rest, Em. Don't stress about tonight. He hadn't looked her in the eye. She thought he was worried about her pregnancy. Now she knew better. He'd been worried she might show up and ruin his act. On stage, Chloe Summers took a step back, her perfect smile fading. "Adrian, maybe we should." "Stay out of it," he hissed, forgetting the microphone was still on. His voice echoed across the ballroom. "You've done enough already." The crowd gasped again. Chloe's cheeks flamed scarlet. For the first time, Emily saw fear in her eyes, fear of being disposable. Ethan leaned closer to Emily. "Are you okay?" he whispered. She nodded faintly, though her hands trembled. "I don't want to make a scene," she said. "It's too late for that," Ethan murmured. "He made the scene. You just have to own it." She straightened her back, her voice firm now. "Adrian, you built your empire on lies and my work. I carried your dreams, your burdens, and now I'm carrying your child. But after tonight, I won't carry your shame." The room went silent. Adrian's face turned pale as the reality sank in. His sponsors, his investors, his board members, half of them were watching. Emily turned to leave. Every step she took echoed through the hall like thunder. Ethan followed, placing his jacket over her shoulders, shielding her from the swarm of cameras. Behind them, Chloe reached for Adrian's arm, but he jerked away, trapped in the ruin he'd created. As the elevator doors closed behind Emily and Ethan, the last thing she heard was the crash of a champagne glass hitting the marble floor. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the hurt and humiliation, something new began to form resolve. The world had seen her broken tonight, but the next time they saw her, they would see her rise. The next morning, Manhattan's skyline glittered coldly under a gray sky. Emily sat by the window of her small apartment overlooking Central Park, the same park she used to jog through when life still felt full of promise. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing headlines screaming from every news outlet. CEO Adrian Cole caught kissing model best friend at charity gala. Wife pregnant, betrayed, and protected by rival billionaire Ethan Blackwell. The internet had chosen sides. And for once, the world seemed to pity her. But pity wasn't what she wanted. She wanted her name back. Her trembling fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that kiss, that smirk, that look of triumph on Adrian's face. A man she'd once believed in more than herself. A man she had built from nothing. 5 years ago, they were just two dreamers renting a one-bedroom in Brooklyn. Adrian had ideas, but no money. Emily had talent, connections, and the patience of someone who believed love could conquer reality. She sold her mother's vintage jewelry to pay for his first startup pitch, stayed up all night editing his slides, designed his entire brand identity, the sleek black and silver Cole Innovations logo that now covered half of Manhattan. Back then, Adrian used to say, "You're the brain behind the beauty, Em." He'd kiss her hand and call her his lucky charm. But luck had run out the moment success arrived. As investors poured in, Adrian changed. The late nights multiplied, and so did the excuses: client dinner, investor trip, networking event. She didn't question it. She was too busy holding the company together, balancing invoices, managing his staff, and keeping his ego fed. Until one night, she found a lipstick mark on his cuff. Not hers, not a stranger's, but Chloe's. Her best friend, her maid of honor, her sister from another mother. The betrayal had started long before the gala. She could see it now. The secret glances at parties. The way Chloe's laughter lingered too long. The messages Adrian deleted before she could read them. She'd buried her doubts then, convincing herself she was paranoid. Now, sitting in silence, she realized she hadn't lost Adrian last night. She'd lost him a long time ago. She just hadn't accepted it. Her phone rang. Ethan's voice came through, calm and deliberate. "Emily, are you holding up?" "I'm breathing," she said quietly. "You should know something," Ethan continued. "Cole Innovations is not as stable as it looks. There's a massive discrepancy in their patent filings, the ones based on your designs. Adrian's been passing your work as his own." Plon. Emily froze. "You're saying—" "I'm saying you own the intellectual rights," Ethan interrupted gently. "And if you want, I'll help you reclaim them." She looked out at the skyline, the empire she'd helped build but never owned. "Why would you help me?" "Because," Ethan said after a pause. I was one of his early investors. I believed in his vision, not knowing it came from you. I owe you more than you know. Emily swallowed hard. The idea of taking back what was hers terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. She had nothing left to lose now, except her dignity, and that she refused to surrender. When she hung up, she opened her MacBook Pro, her fingers hovering over old blueprints, sketches, and drafts, the designs Adrian had stolen. She began compiling them into a single folder labeled Proof of Origin. Her baby kicked gently, as if to remind her what she was fighting for. The woman who built his empire was gone. The one who would take it back had just been born. The morning after the scandal, Chloe Summers woke up in Adrian's penthouse in silk sheets that didn't belong to her. The city outside glittered like a promise she thought she'd finally claimed. She stretched lazily, scrolling through the photos from the gala that had already gone viral. Her lips curved into a smile. In every shot, she looked flawless, radiant, victorious, untouchable. Adrian, still in his tuxedo pants, stood by the window, jaw tight. He'd been on the phone all morning, barking orders to his publicist. We control the story. Say it was a misunderstanding, a marketing stunt. Chloe rolled her eyes. Adrian, darling, the story's already out there. The world saw what it saw. Lean into it. She sauntered up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. People love a scandal. We can use it. He turned sharply, his expression dark. This isn't a photo shoot, Chloe. You have no idea what's at stake. Oh, I do, she said sweetly. Your investors, your board, your reputation. All things that can vanish overnight. Unless, of course, you marry me. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Marry you? You think this is about love? No, Chloe replied, tilting her head, her tone smooth as honey. It's about survival. You need a partner the media can forgive, someone glamorous enough to distract them. I can do that for you. She traced a finger along his collar. But I need something too. Half of Cole Innovations. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then Adrian laughed, cold, humorless. You've lost your mind. Chloe smiled. Maybe. But I'm the only one who still believes in you. What Adrian didn't know was that Chloe had already made her move. Days before the gala, she had hacked into his company's internal drive, using a password Emily once trusted her with a careless favor from an old friend. She downloaded confidential blueprints, client data, and internal communications. She planned to sell them to a rival firm if Adrian ever betrayed her. Now, betrayal was already in motion. Meanwhile, Emily sat in Ethan Blackwell's office, a sleek glass tower overlooking Park Avenue. Ethan's assistant placed a Cartier pen beside her as she signed a confidentiality agreement. This isn't about revenge, Ethan reminded her. It's about justice. And protecting what's rightfully yours. Diamondeye. Emily nodded. I want to believe that, she said softly. But I'm not sure justice exists in his world. It will, Ethan said, his gaze steady. Because you're going to take it from him piece by piece. As she left his office, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed on screen. You can't hide behind Ethan forever. We both know how to destroy each other. See, Chloe. Emily's hands trembled. The betrayal still stung like an open wound. Once, Chloe had been her closest friend, the girl she'd shared secrets and dreams with, the one she trusted with her first big client. Emily had designed Chloe's entire portfolio before her modeling career took off. She'd even introduced her to Adrian. And now, that kindness had been weaponized. At Cole Innovations, Adrian was unraveling. The board demanded answers. Sponsors threatened to pull funding. Then came the leak. Confidential client blueprints posted anonymously on an investor forum. The company's stock plummeted overnight. Adrian slammed his fist on his desk, fury boiling in his chest. Who did this? He turned on Chloe, who only smiled faintly and whispered, maybe it's karma. But Chloe's poison ran deeper than he realized. Hidden among those leaked files were documents linking Adrian's shell companies to tax evasion and forged contracts. Evidence she had planted to secure her own leverage. Emily didn't know it yet, but the chaos Chloe unleashed would soon destroy them both. And in the ashes, only one woman would rise. The rain had not stopped since that night at the plaza. Manhattan's skyline was drenched in silver and sorrow as Emily watched droplets slide down her apartment window. The city that once felt alive now looked like a battlefield, and she was the last one standing. The scandal had exploded online, yet what hurt most wasn't the public humiliation. It was the realization that she had ignored every warning sign, every whispered truth her heart had tried to tell her. It hadn't started with the kiss. It started long before, in 1,000 small betrayals. She remembered the late nights when Adrian claimed to be meeting investors at the Ritz-Carlton, the way he came home smelling faintly of Dior Sauvage and champagne, the mysterious phone calls at midnight, always answered in the hallway. The receipt she found once in his pocket, dinner for two at La Mirage, the same restaurant he swore he hated because of the pretentious crowd. When she'd asked him about it, he smiled that disarming smile and said, "Relax, Em. You overthink everything." And she'd believed him, because love made her foolish and pregnancy made her hopeful. Her best friend Chloe had been there through it all. "You're lucky, Em," she'd say over lattes at Starbucks, her manicured fingers tracing the cup's rim. "Men like Adrian don't come twice." There had been something strange in Chloe's tone back then, something sharp hidden behind the sweetness. But Emily had brushed it off. Now, looking back, every word sounded like a prophecy she refused to hear. The night before the gala came rushing back in fragments. Adrian had been cold, distracted, pacing by the window while she packed his tuxedo. She'd offered to join him, excited to finally see her design unveiled. He told her she was too tired, that she should rest for the baby. Then, for the first time in months, he kissed her forehead instead of her lips. That should have been enough. A woman's intuition is a siren, and she had silenced hers. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock. When she opened the door, Ethan Blackwell stood there tall, composed, holding a small paper bag from a nearby cafe. "You didn't answer your phone," he said softly. "So I brought breakfast." She tried to smile but couldn't. "I'm not really hungry." "Then eat for the baby," he said, setting the bag on the table. "And listen. I found something you need to see." "Jabu." He opened his iPad, showing her a series of internal memos, proof that Adrian had been selling her architectural blueprints to foreign developers under his name. Her designs, her art, her life's work. For a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. "How did you get this?" Ethan hesitated. "Let's just say someone inside his company doesn't like what he's become. You're not the only one he's betrayed." She scrolled through the files, recognizing every sketch, every digital mark she'd ever made. It was like watching pieces of herself being stolen frame by frame. Her tears burned, but her voice was steady. "He didn't just cheat on me, he erased me." Ethan's gaze softened. "Then let's make sure the world remembers who you are." But as she looked up at him, something flickered in his eyes, a shadow she couldn't name. Was it pity? Or something deeper, something that might one day matter? She didn't know yet. That night, after Ethan left, Emily opened her old photo album, one filled with pictures of her and Adrian before success poisoned him. They were young, poor, laughing on a Brooklyn rooftop, drinking cheap wine from paper cups. She closed it gently. The woman in those photos was gone, and in her place stood someone stronger, someone dangerous, a woman who would never ignore the signs again. The night before the gala, everything had felt deceptively perfect. The apartment smelled of lavender and candle wax, the kind of peace Emily had fought to keep alive even as the cracks in her marriage widened. She was 6 months pregnant, glowing in the soft light, arranging Adrian's tuxedo and cufflinks on their marble dresser. The silk of her robe brushed against her skin, hiding the tremor in her hands. Adrian was in the study, his voice low, confident, the tone he reserved for business calls and secrets. Emily could hear him pacing, saying phrases that made no sense. "Chloe will handle the PR." "No, she's ready for the announcement. Don't worry. She'll look perfect." At first, she smiled. She thought he was planning a surprise, maybe even something for her, a tribute to her designs, their shared dream. But then came the laughter on the other end of the line, a soft, feminine laugh that stopped Emily in her tracks. "Chloe." The sound was unmistakable. When Adrian ended the call, she walked in, forcing her tone to stay calm. "Chloe, you're still working with her?" He didn't flinch. "She's doing the promotional campaign for the gala." "Don't start. It's business." "She's my best friend, Adrian," she said quietly. "You didn't even tell me she'd be there." He loosened his tie, irritated. "You've been so emotional lately. Everything turns into a fight. Maybe it's the pregnancy hormones, I don't know." The words hit her like a slap. She wanted to shout, to demand honesty, but all she could manage was a whisper. "I just wanted to feel included." Adrian sighed, the picture of exhaustion. "I have a board meeting in the morning. Let's not do this now." He grabbed his phone, brushing past her like she was a piece of furniture. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed was unbearable. Emily sank onto the bed, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. The baby kicked once, twice, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. That night, she dreamed of water, of drowning, of reaching for someone who kept stepping farther away. At dawn, she woke to the sound of rain against the window and the faint glow of the city skyline. Adrian hadn't come home. His side of the bed was cold. On the nightstand, his phone charger was gone, his favorite watch missing. Still, she refused to believe what her heart already knew. She made his coffee. She ironed his shirt. She texted him, "Good luck today, love. I'll be cheering for you." There was no reply. Hours later, her phone buzzed with a message from Chloe. "Can't wait to see you tonight at the plaza. You'll be so proud of Adrian." Emily stared at the text for a long time, her chest tightening. Something inside her whispered, "Don't go." But she went anyway. She believed love could still be salvaged, that maybe seeing her would remind Adrian who he was, who they were. She spent the afternoon preparing soft makeup, a gown that shimmered gently around her growing belly. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman trying too hard to hold on to a dream that had already turned to dust. Before leaving, she placed her wedding ring on the dresser, uncertain why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe some part of her already knew she wouldn't return the same. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened like mirrors. A black Mercedes idled at the curb, waiting to take her to the plaza. As she stepped inside, the city lights reflected in the window, beautiful, sharp, and cold. By the time she reached the Gala, her fate was already sealed. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a cathedral of wealth that night. Gold drapes, crystal chandeliers, the soft murmur of high society circling like vultures around power. Reporters gathered near the red carpet, their lenses trained on the stage where Adrian Cole was expected to make the biggest announcement of his career. What no one knew was that fate had decided to steal the spotlight. Moments before the scandal broke, the tall glass doors opened, and Ethan Blackwell entered alone, elegant and dangerously composed. His presence changed the room instantly. Conversations stalled. Even the orchestra faltered for half a beat. Ethan was the kind of man people whispered about but rarely approached. A billionaire investor who built empires and destroyed them with equal precision. He wore a tailored midnight tuxedo, his cufflinks glinting under the light, his every movement deliberate. He nodded politely to a few board members, but his attention wasn't on them. His eyes swept across the ballroom until they landed on Emily Carter, standing just beyond the entrance, her silver gown glowing softly under the chandeliers. For a moment, Ethan forgot the crowd. All he saw was her fragile but defiant, a woman who had walked into the lion's den with nothing but her dignity. He stepped toward her, ignoring the murmurs that rippled through the crowd. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, his voice warm against the icy tension of the room. Emily's lips trembled. "I didn't come to start a war, Ethan. I came to show my work." His eyes softened. "Then hold your head high. Let them see what he threw away." Across the room, Adrian stood on stage beside Chloe Summers, basking in the glow of cameras. He spotted Ethan first, then saw Emily beside him, and the color drained from his face. The confident CEO, who once controlled every narrative, suddenly looked like a man watching his empire crack in real time. Chloe followed his gaze, her smile faltering as she saw Emily, radiant and uninvited, with his rival. "What's she doing here?" she hissed. Adrian's grip on the microphone tightened. "I'll handle it." But before he could, Ethan guided Emily farther into the room. The two of them drew every pair of eyes. Some guests whispered in awe, others whispered in envy. To the cameras, they looked like royalty. To Adrian, they looked like the end of his story. The host's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, Please welcome our distinguished guest, Mr. Ethan Blackwell of Blackwell Global. Applause erupted, polite but eager. Ethan smiled faintly, placing a hand at Emily's back as they ascended the steps. He didn't say a word, but his gesture spoke volumes. The message was clear. She's not alone anymore. Adrian stepped forward, his face rigid. "Ethan," he said tightly, "didn't expect to see you here." "Really?" Ethan replied coolly. "I own 15% of this event." The audience laughed lightly, unaware of the storm brewing beneath their polite smiles. Chloe tried to regain control, her voice syrupy. "It's lovely to see everyone together, the past, the present, the truth." Ethan interrupted, his gaze sharp. "That's what this night is really about." The tension was palpable. Adrian forced a smile, but sweat glistened at his temple. For the first time in years, he wasn't the most powerful man in the room. Emily stood silently beside Ethan, her pulse hammering. She hadn't planned to expose Adrian tonight, but destiny had its own script. The man who betrayed her was about to learn what it felt like to be watched, judged, and found wanting. As the orchestra resumed, Ethan leaned down and whispered, "You don't need revenge, Emily. You need truth. Let it do the damage for you." She met his gaze, steady and sure. "Then let the truth begin." Outside, lightning flashed over Manhattan, a fitting omen for the storm that was about to break. The moment the orchestra's melody faded, the world seemed to hold its breath. Cameras turned toward the stage where Adrian Cole stood beside Chloe Summers, his hand hovering over the microphone. The light glimmered against his cufflinks, but his eyes darted nervously toward Emily and Ethan at the entrance. "Tonight," Adrian began, his voice louder than it needed to be, "we celebrate innovation, partnership, and a vision for the future." His smile was the same one he'd used for investors. Perfectly rehearsed, entirely false. And none of this would be possible without the incredible Chloe Summers. Applause rippled through the ballroom, shallow and hesitant. Chloe, glowing in her red gown, turned toward the cameras and kissed Adrian's cheek. But that wasn't enough for him. With hundreds of flashes firing, he cupped her face and kissed her full on the lips, deliberately, possessively. A move so shocking that gasps erupted from every corner of the room. It wasn't just scandalous, it was cruel. Emily's hand tightened on her clutch. The baby inside her shifted, as if mirroring her pain. Every camera in Manhattan seemed to capture her expression, shock, disbelief, heartbreak, and broadcast it to the world. Her humiliation was complete. Adrian pulled away from Chloe, smirking, his voice dripping arrogance. "When you find someone who believes in your dream, you don't let them go." That was the last straw. Ethan's calm voice broke the silence. "Interesting sentiment," he said evenly, stepping forward. "Especially when that dream was never yours to begin with." The crowd turned. Whispers swelled like a wave. Adrian froze, his jaw tightening. "Excuse me?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "I've seen your designs, the ones presented in tonight's proposal. They match Emily Carter's blueprints from 3 years ago, right down to the signatures she filed under Cole Innovations." Gasps filled the room again. The investors began to murmur. Adrian's mask of composure cracked. "That's ridiculous," he snapped. "She worked under my name. Everything she made belongs to me." "Not according to intellectual property law," Ethan replied coolly. "And not according to the original investor agreement. The one you altered." The entire ballroom went still. Even Chloe's perfect smile faltered. Emily didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Ethan's words were blades sharper than anything she could have spoken. The cameras swung toward her now, a glowing figure in silver, standing tall despite the heartbreak that had brought her here. Adrian's voice rose in desperation. "You're trying to destroy me." "No," Ethan said, his tone dropping to steel. "You did that yourself when you forgot who built your empire." For the first time, Adrian looked small, a man trapped in the cage of his own arrogance. His board members shifted uncomfortably. Reporters whispered into their microphones, relaying every word to the outside world. Then, as if fate wanted to seal his ruin, Chloe's phone buzzed. A notification flashed on the massive LED screen behind the stage. Her own Instagram live feed, accidentally connected to the event's projector. On the screen appeared a video from earlier that week. Chloe in Adrian's office, laughing into the camera. He thinks I'm in love with him, she said. But once the deal's signed, I'm gone. One. The crowd erupted. Adrian turned on her, eyes blazing. You, my four. Chloe backed away, pale. I didn't mean, but it was too late. The proof was there, broadcast larger than life. Emily's heart pounded as Ethan gently took her arm. Let's go, he said quietly. You've made your point. As they walked out, cameras followed, not to chase a scandal, but to capture a symbol. The betrayed wife, walking away, unbroken, while her husband's empire crumbled behind her. And for the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to breathe. The rain returned that night, pounding against the windows like a cruel reminder that storms never end easily. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, still in her silver gown, mascara streaked down her cheeks. The television in the background replayed the footage from the gala again and again. Adrian's kiss with Chloe, Ethan's confrontation, and her face, frozen in heartbreak under blinding lights. She switched it off. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. For the first time since the scandal erupted, she let herself cry, deep, shaking sobs that tore through her like something primal. Every betrayal, every humiliation, every whispered insult in that glittering ballroom replayed in her mind. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from journalists, gossip sites, even distant relatives. Are you okay? You poor thing. He's trending worldwide. But not one of them asked the question she truly needed. What happens next? When she finally looked up, her reflection in the mirror startled her. She barely recognized the woman staring back, hollow-eyed, fragile, broken. For months, she had fought to keep her marriage alive, telling herself love could survive anything. But love couldn't survive arrogance, deceit, and public humiliation. She whispered to her reflection, "He took everything from me, but he won't take me." Just then, a sharp pain shot through her stomach. She gasped, clutching the edge of the bed. Panic surged. For one terrifying moment, she thought she was losing the baby. She forced herself to breathe, counting seconds, whispering reassurances to the tiny life inside her. "Hold on, sweetheart. Mommy's here. Mommy's not giving up." She called her doctor, who urged her to rest and come in the next morning. Exhausted, she curled up on the bed, wrapping her arms around her belly. Hours later, she woke to a knock on the door. Ethan stood outside, drenched from the rain, holding a paper bag of soup and prenatal vitamins. His voice was quiet but firm. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." She wanted to tell him to leave, to say she didn't need saving, but her strength was gone. "I'm fine," she murmured. "No," he said, stepping inside. "You're not, and that's okay." He set the bag on the counter, then handed her a towel. "You did something tonight most people never could. You faced humiliation, and still walked out with your head high. That takes courage." Emily shook her head. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like dying in slow motion. Ethan's gaze softened. Then maybe dying was what needed to happen, not to you, but to the version of you that still thought he deserved your loyalty. She stared at him, unsure whether to hate him or thank him. "You talk like you've been there." "I have," he admitted. "I once trusted someone who nearly destroyed my company. But pain makes survivors ruthless and brilliant." His words lodged in her chest like a spark. "And what do survivors do?" she asked quietly. "They rebuild," he said simply, "but stronger, smarter, harder to break." That night, after Ethan left, Emily sat in front of her laptop. She opened the folder labeled Proof of Origin and began uploading every sketch, every file Adrian had stolen. She filed copyright claims, sent documents to her attorney, and attached timestamps from her original work. Each click was a stitch mending her broken spirit. The storm outside raged harder, thunder shaking the glass, but she didn't flinch. By dawn, the folder was uploaded, the evidence locked, and her mind clear for the first time in months. She looked out at the city that had watched her fall and whispered, "Watch me rise." Palm. Because that night, in the ruins of betrayal, Emily Carter stopped being the victim. She became the reckoning. Morning light crept through the curtains, soft and hesitant, as if afraid to touch the wreckage of Emily's life. Her phone lay silent beside the untouched breakfast Ethan had brought the night before. For the first time in weeks, The city outside was calm, but inside her mind, chaos churned like a storm that refused to end. She had spent the night filing legal claims, sending confidential documents to her attorney, and documenting every sketch Adrian had ever stolen. Now, exhaustion hung heavy on her shoulders, but beneath it, a strange sense of control began to return. For the first time since the betrayal, she wasn't reacting, she was planning. The shrill buzz of her phone startled her. The screen flashed with an unfamiliar number from San Francisco. She hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Carter. The voice was smooth, professional, American with a faint European lilt. My name is Ava Morton, Executive Director for the Blackwell Foundation. Mr. Blackwell asked me to reach out personally. He'd like to offer you a design contract. Emily blinked. A design contract? Yes, Ava continued. We're developing a new series of community centers along the West Coast, focused on creative arts and education. Ethan believes your design aesthetic is exactly what the project needs. He's asked for you to head the design team starting immediately. Emily gripped the phone tighter. But I'm 6 months pregnant. I can't travel that much right now. Ava's tone softened. We understand. You'd work remotely for the first phase. Mr. Blackwell's jet will take you to San Francisco once you're ready. You'll have full creative control and complete ownership of your work. For a long moment, Emily couldn't speak. She wasn't used to being offered control anymore. Not after years of being overshadowed by Adrian's ego. Why me? She finally whispered. Because, Ava said gently, Ethan doesn't believe in broken people. He believes in unfinished ones. The call ended, leaving Emily staring at the screen, her heart pounding. She wanted to cry but couldn't. She wanted to feel joy, but it was tangled with disbelief. Ethan was giving her what Adrian had stolen: trust, autonomy, purpose. She stood slowly, walking to her desk where the remnants of her past life still lingered: sketches of Cole Innovations' first office, notes written in her handwriting but signed with Adrian's name. She picked one up and traced the lines, then tore it clean in half. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Adrian. Adrian, you've embarrassed me enough. Stay out of my business. I'll make sure you regret crossing me. Emily stared at the message, her lips curving into a faint, tired smile. You already did, she whispered. Then deleted it. Outside, the city shimmered in winter sunlight. For once, it didn't look cruel, it looked full of possibility. She called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. I was hoping you'd call. Did you set that up? She asked, her voice soft but wary. I did, he admitted. You need a new beginning. Somewhere your name stands on its own. And what do you get out of it? There was a pause. Peace, Ethan said simply. Maybe redemption, maybe just the satisfaction of seeing justice done. Emily closed her eyes, the words sinking deep. Then I'll take it. Good, Ethan replied. The Blackwell jet leaves Friday. You deserve to start writing your own story again. As she hung up, the baby kicked lightly, almost as if approving the decision. She smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't know it yet, but that phone call was the hinge of her fate, the line separating the woman who'd been broken from the one who would rise. And far across town, as Adrian poured himself another drink, oblivious to what was coming, the empire he had stolen from her began quietly, inevitably to crumble. The private jet touched down at San Francisco International Airport just after sunset. Through the oval window, the horizon glowed in gold and lavender, the bay shimmering beneath the fading light. Emily's heart raced as she looked out. Not with fear this time, but with the fragile pulse of something she hadn't felt in months. Possibility. She stepped onto the tarmac with one hand resting over her belly. The ocean air was crisp, clean, and strangely healing. Waiting beside a sleek black Mercedes was Ava Morton, the poised woman who had called days earlier. Mrs. Carter, Ava greeted warmly. Welcome to California. Please, Emily said, smiling faintly. Just Emily. The drive into the city was quiet, except for the hum of traffic along the Golden Gate Bridge. The city lights spread before her like a promise, soft, endless, full of second chances. Ava explained the project on the way. The foundation wants to create community art centers in underserved neighborhoods. Spaces where design meets empathy. Ethan said you'd understand that vision. Oh. Emily turned toward the window, the words sinking in. He's right, she whispered. That's exactly what I used to dream about. When they arrived at her temporary apartment in Pacific Heights, it took her breath away. It wasn't luxury for show. It was serenity. Light oak floors, pale curtains, a view of the bay. A MacBook Pro and a leather-bound sketchbook lay waiting on the marble desk, along with a simple note, "Welcome home. E. Home." For the first time in months, Emily laughed, softly, almost in disbelief. The following days were a blur of work and quiet healing. She poured herself into sketches, blueprints, and concepts. The fatigue of pregnancy couldn't slow her. Every stroke of her pencil felt like stitching a new soul into the woman she'd become. She designed open, sunlit spaces, filled with color and life. The opposite of the sterile offices Adrian had demanded. Each night, she FaceTimed Ethan, who remained in New York to oversee the legal storm building around Cole Innovations. "You look different," he said one evening, his tone soft. "Lighter. Maybe it's the air," she teased. "Or maybe I'm finally breathing again." He smiled, the kind of smile that made the silence between them feel comfortable. "How's the baby?" "Kicking like a future architect," she said. "You'll meet him soon." "You." But when the call ended, she stared at his name on the screen, her chest tightening. There was something unspoken growing between them, something she was too afraid to name. One afternoon, Ava entered her studio with a manila folder. "You might want to see this," she said, setting it on the table. Inside were screenshots from financial journals, headlines blazing, "Cole Innovations under federal investigation for fraud." Emily's breath caught. Beneath the headline was a photo of Adrian, looking pale, furious, cornered. Ava's expression was unreadable. They found evidence of stolen designs. Anonymous tip from someone close to him. Emily didn't ask who. She already knew. Ethan. Part of her wanted revenge. Another part wanted peace. And peace, she realized, came not from seeing him fall, but from no longer caring. That evening, she stood on her balcony overlooking the Bay Bridge, her sketchbook open to a new design. A building shaped like a rising wave, a symbol of resilience, a symbol of her. The baby kicked, gentle but firm, and she smiled through tears. "We're okay now," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." For the first time in a long time, she believed it. The woman who had once been shattered in New York was gone. In her place stood Emily Carter, the architect of her own rebirth. Back in Manhattan, the skyline glittered like a lie. Bright, seductive, and fragile. Inside the 48th floor boardroom of Cole Innovations, Adrian Cole sat surrounded by men in suits who once worshipped him. Now, they stared as if he were a ticking bomb. The air smelled of espresso and panic. Across the table, the CFO cleared his throat. "The SEC audit is official, sir. They've frozen 2 of our accounts pending investigation." Adrian slammed his hand on the table. "Over what? Speculation? Anonymous tips?" The CFO hesitated. "It's not just speculation. The documents they received, blueprints, emails, timestamps, they all match designs owned by Emily Carter." The room went silent. The sound of Adrian's pen hitting the table echoed like a gunshot. "That's impossible," he hissed. "She worked for me. Everything she did was under my company's name." "Except it wasn't," the CFO said quietly. "The contracts she signed were never filed. Someone deleted them from the archive 3 years ago. It's fraud." Adrian's pulse thundered in his ears. He could feel his empire slipping not from a rival, but from the woman he had once dismissed as weak. Across the city, news outlets feasted on the story. Cole Innovations under investigation for intellectual property theft. Pregnant wife's designs at the center of scandal. Photos from the Gala accompanied every article. Adrian's arrogant kiss, Emily's quiet strength, Ethan Blackwell's unflinching stare. By noon, sponsors began withdrawing. His phone rang non-stop. Investors demanding explanations, lawyers threatening to quit. The building that had once been his throne now felt like a cage. He poured himself a drink, staring out at the gray skyline. "This can't be happening," he muttered. But it was. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Emily sat across from Ethan on a video call. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, calm amid chaos. "It's starting," Ethan said. "The board is calling for his resignation." Emily hesitated. "I didn't want to ruin him." "Yes, you did," Ethan said softly. "And that's okay. Some men only learn when they lose everything." She looked down, tracing the edge of her teacup. "Does it make me cruel that I'm not sorry?" "No," he replied. "It makes you free." That night, the world watched as Adrian's downfall went live on every business network. Cameras swarmed the entrance of Coal Innovations as federal agents escorted him past flashing lights. His carefully built image, the visionary CEO, the tech prodigy, the golden boy of Wall Street, shattered in seconds. Chloe Summers was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she had fled to Miami, taking with her what remained of his pride. The next morning, tabloids splashed his photo across every front page, from genius to fraud, the fall of Adrian Cole. At home, Adrian watched the coverage in silence, his penthouse a museum of a life already gone. He looked at a framed photo of him and Emily on their wedding day, her smile radiant, his confident, and for the first time regret cut through the arrogance. He whispered her name like a confession. Emily. But across the country, Emily wasn't thinking about him. She was sitting in a sunlit office, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, reviewing blueprints for her new design center. The logo at the top of the page read, "Carter Atelier." Ethan walked in, carrying 2 coffees. "Bad news travels fast," he said, setting one in front of her. "I saw," she replied quietly. "I thought it would feel like victory." "And?" She smiled faintly. "It feels like peace." Outside, the bay glimmered beneath a clear sky, a world away from the gray storms of New York. Adrian Cole's empire was crumbling, and in its ruins, Emily Carter's name was finally being written in light. Days turned into weeks, and San Francisco began to feel like a second skin for Emily. Her days were filled with design meetings, foundation calls, and gentle baby kicks reminding her why she had to keep going. But even as the Pacific wind cleared her mind, something lingered, a question she couldn't silence. Why had Ethan helped her so completely, so selflessly? He had power, influence, connections. Yet, every move he made seemed to protect her, even at the cost of his own reputation. And then one morning, she found a clue. A courier delivered a thick envelope marked confidential from a law firm in Manhattan. Inside were corporate documents, original investment agreements from the earliest days of Coal Innovations. Her eyes widened when she saw the name printed beside the largest investor stake, Blackwell Holdings. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. "You've seen it," he said quietly. Emily's voice trembled. "You were one of Adrian's first investors?" "Yes," he admitted. 5 years ago. I met him when he was still running the company out of your garage. I thought he was brilliant. But I didn't know the brilliance wasn't his." "Well," she sank into her chair, heart pounding. "You knew about my designs?" "Not at first," Ethan said. He presented them as his own. "I invested millions into his dream. Your dream. Though I didn't realize it. When I finally learned the truth, I tried to pull out. He threatened to ruin me if I spoke." Emily's breath caught. "And you stayed silent." "For a while," he confessed. "Until I saw your name in a charity press release last year. You'd written a line that stopped me cold. Design can rebuild what pain destroys." I knew then who the real architect was. There was a pause, heavy and intimate. "I owed you the truth," he said softly. "And maybe I wanted redemption." Emily didn't know what to feel, betrayal, gratitude, or something more dangerous. Her voice came out low, steady. "So helping me wasn't just justice, it was guilt." "It started that way," Ethan said. "But it isn't anymore." She swallowed hard. "Then what is it now?" "Silence. The kind that hums between 2 people who both know the answer but aren't ready to say it." He finally broke it. "It's belief, Emily. I believe in what you're building, and I believe in you." Later that evening, she walked along Crissy Field, the wind carrying the scent of salt and fog. She watched the Golden Gate Bridge glow against the dusk, the city lights reflecting on the water. For the first time, the ghosts of her past didn't follow her. They simply watched her walk away. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, News broke that Adrian Cole had filed for bankruptcy protection, a last, desperate move to shield his remaining assets. Reporters dug deeper and uncovered inconsistencies in his filings. Hidden accounts, offshore transfers, fraud layered upon fraud. Emily closed the laptop, heart pounding. Adrian wasn't done, not yet. That night, Ethan called again. He's trying to liquidate his shares before the investigation freezes them. If he succeeds, he'll walk away with millions. What can we do? She asked. You can't do anything, Ethan said. But I can. The next day, Ethan made a public move no one saw coming. Blackwell Holdings announced a takeover bid for Cole Innovations, acquiring the collapsing company for pennies on the dollar. It was a corporate strike delivered with surgical precision. When the deal was complete, Ethan sent her one message. Justice isn't loud, it's final. Emily stared at the words for a long time. For years, she had been the invisible architect behind other people's success. Now, her work and her truth were finally being written into history. The morning fog rolled in from the bay like a soft gray curtain, blurring the edges of San Francisco's skyline. Emily stood on the balcony of her apartment, her sketchbook open on the railing, untouched. She should have been sketching. Her foundation project deadline was days away, but her mind was somewhere else. Ethan's takeover of Cole Innovations had changed everything. She had watched the news in disbelief. Blackwell Holdings acquires Cole Innovations. CEO Adrian Cole steps down. It was poetic justice wrapped in corporate language. The man who once dismissed her as insignificant was now a headline casualty of his own greed. Yet beneath the satisfaction, Emily felt something more complicated. A quiet ache she couldn't name. Her phone rang. Ethan. Still thinking about him? He asked when she answered, his voice low, knowing. I'm thinking about how quickly the past collapses, she said. 1 minute you're building a life. The next, it's rubble. Then rebuild. Ethan replied simply, but this time let's build it on your terms. What do you mean? I mean an alliance. Emily turned, startled. Between us? He chuckled. Professionally, for now. You've already proven your designs have value beyond anyone's measure. I want to invest in Carter Atelier. Make it global. The words hit her harder than she expected. Ethan, that's business, he interrupted. And maybe a little bit of faith. She smiled faintly. You already gave me a second chance. Why risk more? Because second chances are my specialty, he said. And because I've seen what happens when someone tries to silence you. It won't happen again. She didn't answer right away. The thought of running her own global brand terrified her as much as it thrilled her. She'd spent years hiding behind someone else's vision. The idea of being seen, truly seen, felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. I'll think about it, she said finally. Do more than think, he said. Decide. Because opportunities don't wait forever. When? That evening, she visited Blackwell Tower, a glass monument overlooking the bay. Ethan's office was minimalist, steel, marble, and one large window that framed the city like a living painting. He stood by it, hands in his pockets, watching the lights flicker on across the skyline. You built this, Emily said quietly. Brick by betrayal, he replied with a dry smile. That's the thing about rebuilding, the ruins teach you precision. He turned to face her. I don't want this alliance to just be about business, Emily. I want you on the board. 50-50 partnership. Her eyes widened. You're offering me half your company? I'm offering you balance, he said. You bring creation. I bring infrastructure. Together, we build something better than revenge legacy. Emily stared at him, speechless. No one had ever offered her equality before, not even Adrian. She had always been the shadow, the helper, the silent strength behind someone else's glory. After a long pause, she said softly, You're serious. Deadly, he said. She extended her hand. Then it's a deal. Ethan took it, his grip firm but warm. The electricity between them was undeniable, something unspoken humming beneath professionalism. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two survivors standing on the same ground of loss, rebuilding in opposite directions until fate made them meet. Later that night, Emily returned home and opened her laptop. Draft contracts for Carter Atelier Global waited in her inbox. Her name sat beside Ethan's, equal in size and weight. For the first time, she saw her future written in bold letters, hers, not borrowed, not stolen. She whispered to herself, no more shadows. Tootie. Outside, the fog lifted, revealing a sky full of stars. A sign that even the darkest nights eventually clear for those brave enough to rebuild. And this time, Emily Carter wasn't rebuilding alone. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Carter Atelier Global, washing the polished oak floors in light. Emily stood at the center of her studio, surrounded by blueprints and models, her baby bump now a soft curve beneath her linen dress. Her world had transformed, no longer the echoing silence of betrayal, but the hum of creation and rebirth. Ethan's partnership had turned her once small dream into an empire. Her name now appeared on design magazines, her face on interviews that called her the woman who rebuilt herself. But fame came with whispers, and those whispers always led back to New York. It had been nearly a year since she'd left the city that broke her. A year since the gala, the kiss, the humiliation that the internet never stopped replaying. She thought she'd buried that part of her life. Until the letter arrived. It came by courier, thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold lettering. She stared at the words for a long time before she opened it. The Plaza Hotel Annual Philanthropy Gala, honoring innovation, leadership, and design excellence. And beneath the elegant print, her name gleamed in black ink. Guest of honor, Emily Carter Blackwell. She froze. Blackwell. Her breath caught Ethan's last name. She hadn't realized he'd added it to the invitation. It wasn't a proposal, it was protection. A shield against the whispers. A declaration that she was no longer alone. Her phone buzzed. It was him. You got the invitation, Ethan said, voice calm, knowing. I can't go back there, she said. Not to that place. He was silent for a moment. You don't have to go back for them. Go back for you. It's not that simple, she murmured. That ballroom that night, it destroyed me. No, he said gently. It revealed you. You just didn't know it yet. She looked out the window at the San Francisco skyline, the bay shimmering beneath the morning light. Her son, now 8 months old, cooed softly in the bassinet beside her. She traced a finger over his tiny hand and whispered, "What kind of example would I be if I stayed afraid?" 3 days later, she was on a flight to New York, her first time returning since everything fell apart. The city greeted her with cold wind and flashing lights, the kind she once associated with pain. But now, they felt like old ghosts she was finally ready to face. When she arrived at the plaza, Ethan was already waiting in the lobby. He turned as she entered, his eyes softening when he saw her, confident, poised, radiant in a gown of ivory silk that shimmered under the chandelier. "You look like someone who's about to rewrite history," he said. She smiled. "Maybe I am." That night, the ballroom was once again filled with Manhattan's elite, investors, designers, and reporters. The same stage that once held her humiliation, now waited for her triumph. When her name was announced, the crowd rose in applause. She stepped forward, head high, every step echoing like redemption. Ethan watched from the edge of the crowd, pride flickering in his eyes. This wasn't just a return, it was a reclamation. As Emily reached the podium, she looked out over the audience and saw him. Adrian Cole, standing in the back, thinner, worn, watching her with eyes full of regret. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Then she smiled. Not in anger, not in pity, but in peace. "We rebuild not to erase what broke us," she said into the microphone, "but to prove we were always the foundation." Applause thundered through the hall. And beneath the same chandeliers that once witnessed her downfall, Emily Carter took back her story, one breath, one word, one dazzling moment at a time. The night of the gala felt like the closing of a circle. The Plaza Hotel glowed under the Manhattan skyline, its grand entrance lined with photographers and sleek black cars. Inside, chandeliers dripped light like liquid gold, and the city's elite moved through the marble halls in a blur of designer gowns and murmured gossip. But when Emily Carter Blackwell entered, the whispers stopped. She stepped into the ballroom in a fitted black Dior gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, her posture poised, her gaze unflinching. On her wrist glinted a slender Cartier bracelet. Once a symbol of love from a man who betrayed her, now a reminder that even broken things could shine again. Every eye turned toward her, every camera followed. But Emily didn't walk like a woman being watched. She walked like a woman who owned the floor. At her side was Ethan Blackwell, sharp in a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, calm as ever. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "Ready?" She gave a faint smile. "I've been ready for a year." Shul. Across the ballroom, Adrian Cole stood near the bar. His once perfect posture slumped beneath the weight of ruin. The scandal, the lawsuits, the bankruptcy, all had stripped him of his empire. His expensive watch was gone, his confidence shattered. Yet when he saw Emily, something inside him flickered, pride, shame, maybe even longing. "Is that her?" whispered a socialite nearby. "The wife?" "The one who be—" "The ex-wife," another corrected, "and the woman who now owns half of Cole Innovations through Blackwell's merger." The whispers stung Adrian like acid. He gripped his glass tighter, eyes never leaving Emily as she crossed the room. On stage, the host announced the night's honoree. This year's award for design, innovation, and philanthropy goes to Emily Carter Blackwell, founder of Carter Atelier Global. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Emily ascended the stage, her steps steady, her gown whispering against the marble floor. She took the microphone with the grace of someone who had walked through fire and survived. "Last time I stood in this room," she began, her voice clear, "I thought my world was ending. I was wrong. It was just beginning." The audience leaned in. Even Adrian froze. "I used to believe success came from loyalty, from building someone else's dream. But real strength, real beauty, comes from rebuilding your own." She paused, eyes locking with Adrian's. "And forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final victory." A collective hush filled the room. Then applause erupted. Not the polite kind, but a wave of genuine respect that rolled across the ballroom. Ethan stepped onto the stage, joining her, pride shining in his eyes. He took her hand as the cameras flashed, and the image, the betrayed wife turned visionary leader, spread across social media within minutes. But beneath the applause, a quieter moment unfolded. Adrian, pale and trembling, moved toward the stage. "Emily," he said softly, "I'm sorry." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "So am I, Adrian. Sorry you learned too late that love isn't ownership. It's partnership." He bowed his head, shame flooding his face. As security gently ushered him away, the orchestra began to play again, filling the silence he left behind. Ethan leaned close to her ear. "You handled that with more grace than I ever could." She smiled. "That's why you believe in me." He chuckled quietly. "That's why I fell for you." The lights dimmed, casting the room in a warm, golden glow. Emily looked out across the ballroom, the same room that once witnessed her humiliation now filled with applause, admiration, and light. The Queen had returned. And this time, she was untouchable. When the applause finally died down, the room pulsed with energy, admiration for Emily, whispers about her triumph, envy at the sight of Ethan's hand resting proudly over hers. But at the far end of the ballroom, Adrian Cole stood alone, his world collapsing piece by piece under the chandeliers that once made him feel immortal. He could barely breathe. Every cheer for Emily felt like a blade to his chest. His name, once golden, was now a punchline whispered behind champagne glasses. The press had turned him into the villain of her fairy tale, and he didn't know how to live without the worship he once commanded. As Emily left the stage, surrounded by reporters and donors eager to congratulate her, Adrian grabbed a glass of whiskey and retreated to the corner of the room. He needed to think. He needed control. But the more he watched her, poised, radiant, glowing in a way he hadn't seen since before he broke her, the more something twisted inside him. "She's everything you said she'd never be." A familiar voice murmured behind him. He turned. Chloe Summers stood there, her blonde hair tied back, her face pale beneath layers of makeup. The glow that once followed her everywhere was gone. "What are you doing here?" Adrian hissed. She smirked weakly. "Invited by one of your old investors. Guess they wanted to see how far we've both fallen." "I told you never to come near me again," he growled. "You told me a lot of things," she said, eyes narrowing. "Like how you'd protect me. Like how Emily was weak. Look at her now, Adrian. She's the headline, and you're the cautionary tale." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You think this is funny?" "No," she whispered. I think it's karma. Adrian's jaw clenched. He turned back toward the stage just as the LED screen flickered to life for a final presentation, a slideshow of Emily's designs through the years. At first, it seemed harmless, until he saw one of his old project blueprints appear, stamped with her signature, dated years before Cole Innovations was even founded. The audience murmured. Investors exchanged knowing looks. One of them, his former chairman, muttered, "So she really built it all." Adrian felt the room tilt. His pulse roared in his ears. The walls seemed to close in as the truth finally became undeniable. The empire he'd lost wasn't just built with her help. It was built on her name. He stumbled toward the exit, ignoring Chloe's mocking whisper behind him. Guess you finally learned what betrayal tastes like. Outside the ballroom, the night air hit him like ice. He loosened his tie and walked toward the valet stand. But the sound of reporters stopped him cold. Mr. Cole, care to comment on the new evidence linking Carter Atelier to your early company patents? Did you falsify records to erase Emily Carter's name from your work? Do you regret leaving your wife? Their flashes blinded him. He shoved past them, voice shaking. No comment. I said no comment. The valet hesitated before handing him his car keys, unsure whether to pity him or fear him. Adrian climbed into his Mercedes, gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white. His reflection in the rearview mirror looked nothing like the man he used to be, haunted eyes, hollow cheeks, the face of a man who had destroyed his own kingdom. He started the car but didn't drive. Across the street, through the hotel's tall windows, he saw Emily laughing softly beside Ethan, her hand resting gently on his arm. The sight burned him alive. For the first time, Adrian realized that losing money, status, and control wasn't the punishment. Watching her find happiness without him was. He whispered into the empty car, "You win, Emily." Then, with a bitter laugh, "You always did." Inside the ballroom, the music swelled again, elegant, triumphant, unstoppable. And as the night went on, Adrian Cole's name disappeared from the world that once revolved around him. Morning broke over Manhattan like a spotlight searching for truth. By the time sunlight streamed through the plaza's tall windows, the story had already exploded across every major outlet. Emily Carter Blackwell's designs linked to Cole Innovations' legacy. New evidence confirms ex-CEO erased wife's work. Reporters called it poetic justice. Investors called it exposure. Adrian Cole called it betrayal. But for Emily, it wasn't revenge, it was release. She stood in her suite overlooking Fifth Avenue, a cup of coffee warming her hands. Below, photographers clustered on the sidewalk, desperate for another glimpse of her. They called out her name, but she no longer hid behind anyone else's shadow. Behind her, Ethan adjusted his tie. "Your publicist says the press conference starts in an hour," he said calmly. Emily took a slow breath. It still feels strange telling the story out loud after all these years. He turned toward her. "Then don't tell it for them. Tell it for every woman who was told her work didn't matter." "One." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound heroic." He met her eyes. "It is." An hour later, under the glittering lights of the same ballroom that had witnessed her humiliation, Emily stepped up to the podium. The cameras flashed. Dozens of journalists crowded forward, ready to capture every word. "Thank you for being here," she began, voice steady. "A year ago, I stood on this very stage and watched my life fall apart. I was betrayed by my husband, my friend, and the company I helped build. But I'm not here to talk about pain. I'm here to talk about truth." The audience leaned in. "I was the designer behind Cole Innovations' first projects. The blueprints, the models, the creative direction, all mine. My name was removed without my consent. I stayed silent out of love, out of fear, and out of loyalty. But silence only protects the wrong people." She paused, letting her words sink in. "So today, I reclaim my voice and my work." The crowd erupted into applause. But before it could settle, a commotion rippled through the back of the room. Cameras swung toward the entrance. Adrian Cole had arrived. He looked disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his face drawn. Security moved to block him, but he raised his hands. "I just want to speak." Emily's expression didn't change. "You had your chance to speak a long time ago." Adrian stepped forward, voice cracking. "Emily, please, you're destroying me." She met his gaze evenly. "No," Adrian, you destroyed yourself. I'm just showing the world the blueprints. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Adrian's face went pale. You don't understand. Chloe, she set me up. She sold company data to competitors. Ethan's voice cut through, calm but sharp. And yet, you signed every document. You erased her name. You did it all willingly. The tension snapped. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised. Adrian froze, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Then, without another word, he turned and fled, flashes chasing him down the corridor. Emily exhaled slowly, the weight of years finally sliding off her shoulders. When the chaos settled, she looked at the cameras once more. We can't rewrite the past, she said softly. But we can choose who we become after it breaks us. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Afterward, Ethan found her backstage, a quiet smile in his eyes. You handled that perfectly. Low. She shrugged, exhausted but peaceful. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about ending the silence. He took her hand gently. You didn't just end it. You changed the story. As they left the ballroom together, photographers outside shouted her name again, not in pity, but in admiration. The woman who once walked into the plaza broken had just walked out of it reborn. And somewhere, across the city, Adrian Cole's empire finally crumbled into dust. That night, the Plaza Hotel was quiet again, the chaos of the press fading into the hum of New York traffic outside. The ballroom had emptied, the last of the reporters gone, leaving only a few scattered glasses and the faint scent of champagne. Emily stood alone on the terrace, overlooking Central Park, the city lights glimmering like constellations at her feet. The air was cool, brushing against her skin, carrying with it the distant sound of taxi horns and laughter from the street below. She should have felt triumphant. She'd won. Adrian's empire was gone, her name restored, the truth finally hers. But instead of victory, she felt something deeper, something quieter. Closure. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered, "It's over." Behind her, the glass door slid open. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You disappeared fast," Ethan said softly, stepping onto the terrace. He had taken off his jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his tie hanging loose. He looked less like the billionaire everyone feared, and more like a man who had finally exhaled. "I needed air," she said. "Too many lights. Too many questions." He joined her at the railing, his gaze following hers across the skyline. "You did what most people couldn't. You faced them. You faced him." Emily smiled faintly. "You make it sound brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt necessary." "Bah. That's what courage really is," Ethan said quietly. "Doing what's necessary when everything inside you wants to run." They stood in silence for a moment. Below them, the city glittered alive, indifferent, eternal. "You know," he said after a pause, "I used to think revenge would fix everything, that making Adrian fall would somehow erase my guilt for ever believing in him." He looked at her. "But watching you tonight, I realized it was never about revenge. It was about redemption." "Redemption?" She turned toward him, her eyes soft. "Redemption for who?" "For both of us," he said simply. Their gazes held, the air between them charged with everything unspoken, shared scars, mutual understanding, and something new, fragile, and electric. "Ethan," she began, but he stepped closer. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "Just listen." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a ring. Not extravagant, but timeless. A simple platinum band set with a single Tiffany diamond, elegant and understated, just like her. "This isn't about fixing you," he said, his voice low. "You were never broken. This is about choosing you. Every version. The woman who survived, who built, who rose." Tears stung her eyes. "Ethan." "18." He smiled faintly. "Don't answer yet. You've spent enough of your life giving your future away. Just know this. I'm not offering protection or power. I'm offering peace." The words hit her harder than any declaration of love could have. Peace. The one thing she'd spent her whole life chasing and never found. She looked down at the ring, then back up at him. You really believe we can have that? After everything? Ethan nodded. Peace isn't the absence of pain, Emily. It's the presence of someone who understands it. Her tears finally fell, warm against the night air. She took his hand and whispered, "Then yes." Ethan exhaled a quiet laugh, one of relief more than joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly over the Hudson River, a storm rolling in, but for the first time, Emily wasn't afraid of the rain. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, watching the city that had once broken her now shine beneath their feet. "You know," she said softly, "a year ago, I walked into this hotel with nothing left to lose. And now?" he asked. She smiled through her tears. "Now, I have everything worth keeping." The wind picked up, scattering the last traces of her old life into the night. And there, under the Manhattan lights, Ethan Blackwell kissed the woman he'd once helped save, now the woman who no longer needed saving. The morning after the gala dawned clear and soft, Manhattan waking slowly under a pale blue sky. The storm that had rolled over the city the night before had washed everything clean. The streets gleamed, and the air smelled like rain and new beginnings. In a quiet corner of the River Cafe in Brooklyn, Emily sat by the window, the skyline reflected in the calm water of the East River. Across from her, Ethan Blackwell stirred his coffee, his usual confidence replaced with a gentler calm. The sunlight caught the Tiffany ring on her finger, scattering light across the table like tiny stars. Emily watched it sparkle, still not quite believing it was real. "Are you sure you want to stay in New York?" he asked softly. "You've already built your legacy in San Francisco. You don't owe this city anything." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I don't want to leave it with hate in my heart. This city broke me, but it also rebuilt me. It's part of who I am." Ethan nodded, his gaze steady. "Then we stay. Together." The word together lingered in the air, warm and certain. At the next table, a young couple whispered excitedly over a magazine spread featuring Carter Atelier Global. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Brilliance: How Emily Carter Redefined Power." The photo captured her at last night's gala, radiant and composed, standing beside Ethan. Emily heard them, but didn't turn. For once, she didn't need validation. She knew who she was. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number flashing on the screen. She hesitated, then opened it. "Adrian, I signed the final papers. The company is officially yours. I'm leaving New York. I hope someday you find peace. The way I never did." She stared at the words for a long time, then set the phone down. "Bad news?" Ethan asked. "No," she said quietly. "Just closure." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "You really forgave him, didn't you?" Emily looked out at the skyline, the same skyline that once symbolized her pain, now glowing under the sunlight. "Not for him," she said. "For me. Carrying hate is like holding your breath underwater. At some point, you have to let go or drown." Ethan smiled. "You sound like someone who's finally free." "I am," she whispered. Outside, the waiter arrived with a small bouquet of white tulips, a gift from the cafe staff, who recognized her from the papers. Emily touched the petals, smiling softly. White tulips, purity, new beginnings. How fitting. When they finished breakfast, Ethan stood and held out his hand. "Come on. There's something I want to show you." He led her to the terrace overlooking the Manhattan Bridge, where the city spread out in all its chaotic beauty. The wind lifted her hair, carrying the scent of the river. "This view," Ethan said, "is why I moved here in the first place. You can see everything, the chaos, the noise, the life. It's proof that no matter how broken something looks, it can still be beautiful." Emily turned toward him. "And what about us?" He smiled. "We're the proof." She laughed softly, her eyes glistening. "You know, I used to think strength meant never falling apart. But now I know, it's about how you rise after." He stepped closer, resting his forehead against hers. "Then you're the strongest person I've ever met." She took his hand, pressing it over her heart. "No, I just finally learned how to choose myself." Below them, the city moved on, taxis honking, ferries cutting through the water, life continuing as it always had. But, for Emily, time seemed to stand still, caught between what had been and what was yet to come. She turned toward Ethan and whispered, "Let's go home." And as they walked away from the railing, sunlight poured over them, warm, golden, infinite. The skyline shimmered behind them, no longer a backdrop to her pain but a monument to her rebirth. Emily Carter Blackwell had not just survived. She had conquered. And under the Manhattan sky, her new beginning had finally begun. So, that's how the story ends. What a journey, right? If you're still here, watching until this very moment, maybe something in Emily's story touched your heart. Maybe because, deep down, we've all been there. Betrayed. Broken. Trying to rebuild ourselves piece by piece. But Emily's story isn't just about revenge or success. It's about healing. It's about learning, as the Stoics once said, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca. Pain doesn't define us, our response to it does. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way." What was meant to destroy Emily became the very thing that rebuilt her. Maybe that's your story too. Maybe right now, you're standing in your own ruins, wondering if you'll ever rise again. You will. Start small. Choose peace. Protect your name, your worth, your voice. Because like Emily, you're not broken. You're becoming. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs strength tonight, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we tell stories that heal, stories that remind you that even after the storm, the light always returns.